Can you believe that crazy Karen showed up at my farm saying that my cows stank too much and that I should get rid of them? If there's one thing I never thought I'd have to explain to an adult, it's that farms smell like farms. There's no avoiding it. It smells of earth, scrub, animals, and, of course, cows. But apparently, for some people, reality is a flexible concept, which is how I ended up meeting a woman who thought that the solution to her smell problems was simply to convince me to get rid of all my cows. Yes, you heard right. The story began when this new neighbor, who I didn't even know had moved to the area, showed up at my farm as if she owned the place. I was going about my normal working day, looking after the cows, checking the machinery and breathing in that pure air mixed with the unmistakable scent of fresh manure, when I saw a white SUV pull up on the dirt road. The car had barely turned off, and the door opened wide, as if someone was about to cast out a demon. And then she got out. High heels on the farm, giant sunglasses, an expression of disgust on her face, and a handkerchief pressed against her nose as if she had just entered a biological war zone. Are you the owner of this place? Not a hello, not a good morning. Nothing. Just this dry question, spat out with a tone of accusation, as if I were directly responsible for some environmental crime. I just raised an eyebrow and nodded, without much patience. Who shows up in the middle of nowhere to complain about farm smells? Well, she continued, without even taking a deep breath, because apparently the air here was too toxic for her refined lungs. It's unbearable here. I live over there in the new house, just around the bend, and it smells awful. How can you live like this? Now, you see, I'm a patient man. I deal with cows all day long. I know that not everything in life is predictable, and that sometimes you have to take a deep breath and stay calm. But to hear that my farm, which has been here for decades, had to change because a new person decided they didn't like the smell, that tested my patience. I could have answered in any number of ways, but I thought a simple, "It's a farm," would suffice. She snorted. She looked indignant. She looked around as if she expected a World Health Organization team to appear out of nowhere to evacuate the area. Yes, but you have to do something. We can't live like this. What about those cows? She pointed disgustedly at the pasture, as if she were facing demonic creatures and not the animals that basically sustain the world of milk and cheese. You have to reduce the amount, I don't know, at least get rid of the smelly ones. Oh, right, because cows come with an odor control button, right? Or rather, maybe I should just teach each one to wear French perfume. I'm the main milk producer in the region, I replied, running out of patience. These cows are my livelihood. You moved to a rural area. What did you expect? The smell of vanilla and lavender? She rolled her eyes as if I were a primitive being incapable of understanding the great olfactory challenges she faced. It's absurd. In any civilized place, you'd have been fined. This should be regulated. There needs to be a smell limit. Yes, a smell limit. I wondered at that moment if this was the kind of person who thought that nature should work according to municipal laws. Like, if it rains too much, can you process the clouds? If the wind blows hard, does she call the manager? But the woman wasn't finished yet. She took a deep breath through the corner of her mouth, trying to avoid any contact between her nostrils and the local air, and announced her brilliant solution. If you can't control the smell, then you should sell those cows and invest in something else. There are cleaner options, like a vegetable plantation, for example. There you go. The great solution for my livelihood and that of dozens of farm employees: drop everything and become a carrot seller because a newcomer with an SUV can't stand the smell of bugs. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, unintentional laugh, more of indignation than humor. Good luck convincing the rest of the city of that. But she didn't laugh. She looked at me with absolute certainty, as if she were about to single-handedly change the fate of world livestock farming. I'm going to do something about it, she promised, as if she had a legal army ready to declare war on the dairy industry. And that's when I realized that this woman wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was one of those people who, when they decide that something bothers them, make a point of turning it into a problem for everyone. What I didn't know, however, was how far she was willing to go to get rid of the smelly cows. And my friends, this story was just beginning. I didn't pay much attention to the woman's threat at first. People like that say a lot of things, but in the end, when they realize they can't change the world as they please, they simply accept reality and move on. I've seen a lot of new neighbors arrive in the area thinking they can turn the countryside into a gated community, and usually, after a while, they give up or end up leaving. But this woman? She wasn't the type to take no for an answer. The first signs that she was really willing to turn my life into hell started a few days later. I woke up in the morning, went out to do my usual rounds of the farm, and when I got close to the entrance gate, I found a piece of laminated paper stuck to the fence with adhesive tape. A notice: Community Alert, Odor and Public Health Problem. The text below said that the farm was emitting toxic smells, which could be affecting air quality and posing respiratory risks to residents in the area, and that measures needed to be taken urgently. The leaflet also ended with an invitation to a community meeting to discuss the problem and a contact email address for complaints. And guess who signed the disgraceful piece of paper? Her. Now, look here. I work with cows, not toxic waste. My cattle aren't releasing radioactive fumes into the air. If there's anything dangerous in this story, it's the level of stupidity of this paper. I took the statement and went into town to ask if anyone else had seen it. It didn't take long to discover that the lampposts and road signs were covered with identical flyers. In other words, she was determined to spread the narrative that I was some kind of environmental villain. And worse, some people started to believe it. At the local grocery store, I overheard a conversation between two elderly people talking about the farm fumes. At the gas station, a guy in the convenience store asked me if it was true that I was exaggerating the number of cows and harming the air. And that's when I realized that the woman wasn't just grumbling. She was campaigning against me. Now, of course, anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that farms have always existed and always will. But it's just that, in recent years, the cities have grown, and a lot of people used to the smell of shopping malls have started moving to rural areas without knowing how life really works in the countryside. So, when a crazy person like this turns up handing out leaflets talking about air contamination, there's always someone willing to listen. But that wasn't the most absurd part. 2 days later, an environmental inspector knocked on the door of my farm. Yes, she had called the environmental agency to inspect the air quality. The inspector, a guy in his 40s, seemed a little embarrassed. He was polite, explained that someone, obviously he couldn't reveal who, had made a formal complaint about air pollution, and that he needed to check the site by protocol. I could do nothing but laugh. Now my farm was treated like a chemical plant. The man walked around the place, looked at the cows, checked the equipment, made notes on a pad, and at the end, with the face of someone who has wasted his time, told me, "Well, from what I can see, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Your handling is correct. There's nothing to justify a report of air contamination." Ah, but the woman wasn't going to take no for an answer. The next day, another flyer appeared, this time claiming that I was bribing inspectors to cover up the problem. In other words, I was now part of a criminal conspiracy. And as if that wasn't enough, the following week someone broke into my farm and graffitied the barn. Yes, the barn, which has been in my family for 3 generations, dawned with words written in red paint: "Cow killer." At first, I had to laugh. How can someone call me a cow killer if all I do is keep them alive to produce milk? But then the laughter turned to anger. Until then, I was just a hysterical neighbor. But now someone had invaded my property. I called the police. The officer who came to the farm wrote everything down, took photos, and filed a police report. Of course, without security cameras, it was difficult to prove who did it, but we all knew. And incredible as it may seem, the woman had the nerve to show up at my farm the next day. This time, she didn't come in high heels or sunglasses. She was wearing sportswear, as if she was casually passing by, trying to pretend she was just a concerned neighbor. She stopped at the side of the fence, crossed her arms and let out as if she wanted nothing. "I hear there's been a problem here? A break-in? Nasty business. It's a real shame that your farm is causing so much revolt." I didn't even bother to reply. I just stared at her, waiting to see if she would dare to say anything else. And of course she did. "Maybe it's a sign that people want change?" There you go. Now the woman was justifying vandalism as if it were a legitimate social protest. I stared at her, not saying a word. And then, with her usual cynical face, she shrugged and walked away, as if nothing had happened. And it was at that moment that I understood. She wasn't going to stop. I just didn't know how far she was willing to go. If until that moment I thought I was dealing with just another lunatic neighbor, the following days proved me wrong. Very wrong. The woman wasn't just throwing ridiculous leaflets around or making pointless complaints. She was escalating the fight to another level. After the episode with the graffitied barn, I made an obvious decision. I installed security cameras. Not that I thought it would stop the nutter from continuing her antics, but at least the next time she decided to bring her anti-cow crusade to my patch, I'd have hard evidence to rub in the police's face. But it turned out that I had underestimated the woman. After all, how could anyone have the audacity to mess with cows? Well, she did. It was an early Saturday morning when it all happened. I was asleep, like any normal person, when I was woken up by the phone ringing. And it wasn't just any phone call. It was one of my employees doing the morning milking, and the guy was desperate. "Boss, there's something very wrong here. There's a cow missing." I woke up on the spot, jumped out of bed, and without even changing my clothes properly, ran outside. I could imagine many things going wrong on a farm. A calf running away, a problem with the machinery, even a wolf invading the pastures. But cow theft, that was unheard of. I arrived at the barn and saw the damage. The corral gate had been broken down. Yes, broken into. It wasn't unlocked by accident. Someone had literally broken the padlock and opened the whole thing. It was like an action movie, only instead of bank robbery, someone decided that releasing cows was the new crime of the century. And the most impressive thing? 6 cows were missing. Now, if you don't know anything about farms, let me explain. Cows don't just disappear. They're not dogs that run after a car. They're heavy, slow, and if you just open the gate, they're not going to march out in a line like well-trained soldiers. To make 6 cows disappear, someone took them. In other words, theft. I checked the new cameras I had installed, and there was the proof. In the middle of the night, a car pulled up near the gate. Someone got out, broke the lock, and let the cows out. Then a second vehicle, a pickup truck with a trailer, arrived a few minutes later. The footage was a little dark, but you could clearly see 2 people guiding the cows into the trailer. I didn't need to be a genius to know who was behind it. I grabbed the footage and ran to the police. The police, to my surprise, really acted fast this time. The motive? Cattle theft is a serious crime. Unlike stupid graffiti or ridiculous flyers, animal theft can lead to jail time. And it didn't take long for the truth to come out. When the police started investigating and talking to some people in town, they discovered that someone had seen the truck pulling a trailer full of cows in the middle of the night. And guess where it was going? Straight to the property of our beloved anti-cow activist. Yes, her. The woman who spent weeks screaming that the cows stank too much, who demanded that I sell my cattle, who said it was a crime against her sense of smell, was now with 6 of my cows on her property. Does that sound like a joke? It's not. The police went to her house, and guess what? There were the 6 cows grazing peacefully in the yard. Now, I'd really like to know what the hell this woman thought was going to happen. What was the plan? Did she really think no one would notice that she had 6 stolen cows in her yard? And the best part? When the police confronted her, she tried to play the victim. I was just saving these animals from exploitation. There you go. Now I was the Disney villain, and she was an animal hero. The police obviously didn't buy this story. Firstly, because theft is theft, no matter what lame excuse you come up with later. Secondly, because a dairy farm doesn't mistreat cows, on the contrary, they live better than many people out there. And thirdly, because no one had asked for her rescue. She was taken to give evidence, and, at that moment, I finally realized that maybe, just maybe, this saga was coming to an end. But of course, this woman still had one last shot. Instead of simply accepting that she'd fucked up, paying for the damage, and getting on with her life like anyone else with a shred of shame, she decided to fight back. And that's when the story got even more absurd. Because the day after her arrest, a petition appeared on the internet. A petition to, guess what? Close my farm. Yes, she was trying to convince people that I was the real criminal. And, believe it or not, she got signatures. This woman was caught red-handed stealing cows, and she still got support. And that's when I knew she wasn't going to give up without a fight. I just didn't know that the biggest madness was yet to come. And when it came, it was a complete disaster. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole story, it's that some people just don't know when to give up. After stealing 6 cows and being caught with them in her backyard, as if she had just opened a clandestine animal sanctuary, this woman should have disappeared in shame, shut her mouth, and got on with her life. But no, not only did she try to justify the theft with an activist speech, she launched a public campaign to close down my farm. And it wasn't just a silly leaflet this time. She created an online petition, made emotional posts on social media, and got a group of radical vegans from out of town to start sharing her story. The narrative? Small-town girl tries to save innocent cows from exploitation, and now she's being unfairly persecuted. That's right. The woman who invaded my property, stole my animals and graffitied my barn, was now a poor victim being oppressed by the cruel system of greedy cattle ranchers. And what's worse, people believed it. From one day to the next, my farm began to be attacked by couch activists. My Facebook business page was flooded with aggressive comments calling me and my team cow torturers. My WhatsApp started receiving messages from unknown numbers calling me a monster. I even started receiving calls from journalists wanting to hear the other side of the story. In other words, this woman managed to turn a clear criminal invasion and theft into a personal media crusade. The situation reached a point where, out of nowhere, people started appearing on the road to my farm with placards. Yes, protest, with signs that read, "Free the caves," "No to animal abuse," and other pearls that seemed to have been copied from a Facebook group of people who have never set foot in a pasture in their lives. Now, mind you, I'm not against activism. You want to fight for a cause? Fine, go for it. But you can't just invent a crime, commit a crime, and then act like you're the good guy. And fortunately, the law agreed with me, because while this woman was putting on her little show online, the police were gathering all the evidence of the theft and preparing the case against her. And that's when she made the fatal mistake. In an attempt to continue her farce, she decided to organize a fundraising event to pay for her legal defense. She literally scheduled a public event in the city center, calling on all supporters to raise money and speak out about the abuses of animal agriculture. In other words, she herself organized a perfect opportunity for the police to find her. And that's exactly what happened. On the day of the event, while a group of half a dozen loiterers held placards and sold vegan cakes to raise funds for the criminal, the police arrived with a warrant for her arrest. And, oh, how I wish I could have seen her face at that moment. The woman was arrested right there, in front of her followers, while shouting that she was being silenced by the milk industry. Yes, yes, because everyone knows that the biggest problem in the modern world is the secret mafia of inland farmers. She was led away in handcuffs, whimpering like a tantruming child at the market. And the irony? The media she herself called to cover the event ended up filming the whole thing. Now, her whole wronged little heroine narrative was blown out of the water. In the days that followed, her petition disappeared. The activists who were at my farm gate simply disappeared, as if they had never existed. My phone stopped ringing with threats from strangers. The whole town finally realized that she was just a nutcase with too much free time and an irrational obsession with other people's cows. The case went to trial and, with all the evidence, the video of the theft, the graffiti, the lion flyers, the testimony of the whole town, she was convicted. The result? Cattle theft. Serious crime. She got time behind bars. Trespassing. Another crime. More time to reflect on her bad choices. Defamation. In addition to the criminal case, I filed a civil suit to make her pay for the damages. And the best part? As part of the penalty, she was banned from going near my farm. In other words, peace. Finally. Now, of course, her story has become a joke in town. Whenever someone comes to live here and starts complaining about the smell of the farm, there are already people ready to tell the legend of the woman who tried to steal cows and destroy cattle farming in the countryside. What about me? Well, I'm back to doing what I've always done, looking after my cows, running my business, and laughing at stories like this. Because, at the end of the day, the only thing that really stank in this story was her stupidity. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like and opinion in the comments.